Lothar Matthäus carrier, and this was motivating me.
I was literally on my phone at home, and they're like, oh, we have the results. We suggest that you remove your breast. And I'm like, wait, what?
When I started stumbling and I started making the mistakes, that I realized that, now that person who I have not forgiven 2 years back, now I know what he feels like.
Very important understanding of life, that you will only get opportunities if you're good. And if you're not good, don't expect opportunities.
The best example I could ever give is Abraham Lincoln, losing every election he ever had till he won the presidency.
You know, I actually have the feeling that my life hasn't started yet.
We all have two lives. The second one begins the day we realize that we only have one life.
Wow.
This is India's #1 news network, and you're watching News 9. English news as it should be.
A very good morning. You're watching News 9. This is Morning Brief at 9. I'm Karthik Malhotra. Thank you so much for tuning in this Thursday morning. The big story coming in today. In fact, overnight, Iran has rejected the US 15-point agenda, issues its own set of 5 conditions to end the war. Meanwhile, Government of India says no PNG if piped gas is available in your area. LPG connections to be cancelled if PNG supply is available. And the rupee plunges to an all-time low, touching 94 against the US dollar as rising oil prices pinch deficit fears. All that and more on this edition of Morning Brief at 9. This is Morning Brief at 9. First up, a quick look at all the headlines we're tracking for you this morning. US sends its 15-point proposal to Iran via Pakistan, seeks halt to uranium enrichment, free Hormuz access and limits on military posture, offers sanctions relief and civil nuclear support in return. US President Donald Trump claims Iran is secretly negotiating with the US, even as Tehran publicly rejects talks. Iran rejects the US proposal to end war, lays down 5 conditions, including sovereignty over Strait of Hormuz, says it won't allow US to dictate war's timeline and will end conflict on its own terms. Back home, the Indian government says no petrol or diesel shortage, urges public to avoid panic buying as LPG supply faces pressure due to Hormuz disruption. Rupee hits a record low of 93 rupees 96 paisa against the US dollar amid FII outflows and West Asia tensions, despite strong equities and softer crude prices. Foreign ministers from the group of 7 gather near Paris as European allies seek to narrow differences with the US on the Iran war while keeping Ukraine and Gaza high on the agenda. US President Donald Trump says he will meet Chinese President Xi Jinping in Beijing on May 14th and 15th after postponing earlier plans due to the Iran conflict. A Los Angeles jury finds Meta and YouTube liable for harmful platform design, ordering $6 million in damages, a major ruling on social media addiction. And Ukrainian President Volodymyr Zelensky says Washington will only offer security guarantees if Kyiv agrees to hand over the Donbas region to Russia, a condition that could reshape peace talks. The United States has reportedly sent Iran a detailed 15-point proposal aimed at ending the ongoing conflict with strict conditions on Tehran's nuclear and regional policies. According to the New York Times, the plan was delivered via Pakistan, which is acting as a mediator and could pave the way for a temporary ceasefire while negotiations take place. Now, the core of US President Donald Trump's proposal are three key demands. First, Iran must completely halt uranium enrichment and hand over its existing stockpile of enriched material. Second, Tehran must ensure full and uninterrupted access through the Strait of Hormuz, a critical global oil route after recent disruptions sent energy prices soaring. And third, Iran must scale back its broader military posture, including limits tied to its strategic capabilities and regional influence. In return, the proposal reportedly offers major incentives, including the lifting of all sanctions and support for Iran's civil nuclear energy program, particularly on the Bushehr facility. Meanwhile, US President Donald Trump has claimed that Iran is quietly negotiating with Washington but is afraid to say it publicly. Now, speaking at a fundraising dinner in Washington, D.C., Trump said Iran's leadership fears backlash on two fronts, from its own people and likely from US actions. Listen in.
I tell you, we're winning so big, nobody's ever seen anything like we're doing in the Middle East with Iran. And they are negotiating, by the way, and they want to make a deal so badly, but they're afraid to say it, because they figure they'll be killed by their own people. They're also afraid they'll be killed by us. There's never been a head of a country that wanted that job less than being the head of Iran. I don't want it. We listen to some of the things they say. We hear them very clearly. They say, I don't want it. We'd like to make you the next supreme leader. No, thank you. I don't want it. I agree with them 100%. But I do. We did a lot. We settled 8 wars. But I actually thought, when I went on this excursion, as I call it, excursion into hell, excursion into a terrible place, when I went on to do something that for 47 years should have been done by any of the other presidents, and you heard numerous of them said they wished they did it, but they didn't have the guts to do it. We had no choice, but I thought it would be much worse. I thought that the energy prices, oil price would go up higher. I thought the stock market would go somewhat lower, but it didn't matter to me. It's short term. What we had to do is get rid of the cancer. We had to cut out the cancer. The cancer was Iran with a nuclear weapon. And we've cut it out. Now we're going to finish it off.
All right, an excursion is what the US president is calling the war in Iran. Meanwhile, Iran says it is reviewing a US proposal to end the ongoing conflict, but insists it is not engaging in direct negotiations. In an interview on state television, Foreign Minister Abbas Araghchi said messages exchanged through mediators cannot be called dialogue or talks with Washington. However, Iran has now rejected the US proposal to end the conflict, making it clear that any ceasefire will happen strictly on its own terms and timeline. A senior security official said that Tehran will not allow Donald Trump to dictate the end of the war, adding that military operations will continue until Iran's conditions are fully met. The officials also dismissed the US proposals routed through intermediaries as unrealistic and out of touch with the situation on the ground. Iran has instead laid down 5 key conditions of its own for ending the conflict, and these include an immediate halt to aggression and targeted killings. Number 2, concrete guarantees that war will not be reimposed on Iran. Number 3, clear commitments on payment of war damages and reparations. Number 4, an end to hostilities across all regional fronts, including resistance groups. And finally, recognition of Iran's sovereignty over the Strait of Hormuz, described as a key guarantee for enforcing any agreement. Now, the official also warned that no negotiations will take place until these conditions are accepted. Tehran has further accused Washington of using diplomacy as a tactic in previous talks, pointing to earlier negotiation rounds in 2025 that were followed by military escalation. Iran maintains that the conflict began with attacks that targeted senior leadership, including Ayatollah Ali Khamenei, and says its retaliatory strikes will continue until its demands are fulfilled.
قدرت راهبردی که از آن دم می‌زدید تبدیل به شکست راهبردی شده. مدعی ابرقدرتی دنیا اگر می توانست از این مخمصه رها شود تا حالا شده بود. اسم شکستتان را توافق نگذارید. دوران وعده هایتان به سر رسیده. امروز در جهان دو جبهه وجود دارد، حق و باطل، و هر حق طلب آزاده‌ای تحت تأثیر امواج رسانه‌ای شما اغوا نمی شود. سطح خود درگیری هایتان به مرحله مذاکره خودتان با خودتان رسیده؟ نه خبری از سرمایه گذاری هایتان در منطقه خواهد بود و نه قیمت سابق انرژی و نفت را خواهید دید تا وقتی که بفهمید ثبات در منطقه توسط دست قدرتمند نیروهای مسلح ما تضمین می شود. ثبات از طریق قدرت. صراحتاً اعلام می کنیم تا موعدی که اراده ما نباشد هیچ وضعیتی به روال سابق بر نمی گردد. این اراده زمانی ایجاد می شود که به طور کامل فکر اقدام علیه ملت ایران از اذهان کثیف شما پاک شود. حرف اول و آخر ما از همان روز نخست این بوده، هست و خواهد بود. کسی همچون ما با کسی مثل شما کنار نخواهد آمد، نه حالا و نه هیچ وقت دیگری.
The White House has now issued a stark warning to Tehran. Press Secretary Karoline Leavitt says President Donald Trump is prepared to escalate strikes if Iran refuses to accept what she called a military defeat. Leavitt warned that Trump does not bluff and cautioned Iran against further miscalculation, saying the U.S. is ready to hit harder than ever before. Listen in.
Remaining elements of the Iranian regime have another opportunity to cooperate with President Trump, permanently abandon their nuclear ambitions, and cease actively threatening America and our allies. But the president's preference is always peace. There does not need to be any more death and destruction. But if Iran fails to accept the reality of the current moment, if they fail to understand that they have been defeated militarily and will continue to be, President Trump will ensure they are hit harder than they have ever been hit before. President Trump does not bluff, and he is prepared to unleash hell. Iran should not miscalculate again.
The White House also said that gas prices will ease once U.S. military operations in Iran conclude. Nobody really knows when. Press Secretary Karoline Leavitt said the current rise is only temporary, adding that the administration will continue to push American energy dominance. She expressed confidence that fuel prices will fall again, crediting the U.S. president for keeping costs in check. Listen in again.
As for the temporary short-term fluctuation in gas prices, the president has said once these combat operations are over, this administration is going to continue to unleash American energy dominance. We're continuing to do that every day, and we're going to see prices at the pump go back down, just as we have over the past year because of this president. And don't think for 1 second if that the Democrats had their way, gas prices would be as they were under the previous administration, the Biden administration, record highs. This president is keeping them as low as he can during this short-term combat operation, and they're going to go right back down when this is over. A stunt from a Democrat on Capitol Hill who I think wants to get himself on cable television.
All right, and energy prices continue to be the focus. But a prolonged war in Iran now risks triggering an unprecedented global energy crisis, one that could eventually impact every corner of the world economy. At the heart of the concern is the Strait of Hormuz, a critical choke point that carries nearly 20% of the world's oil and gas supplies, making any disruption a global shock. But it is already clear that some countries are either more exposed to that impact or less able to deal with it. Here's a detailed report.
A prolonged Iran war risks an unprecedented crisis in global energy supplies. And that kind of shock could ripple through every major economy, raising costs for households and businesses. Dmitry Zhdanikov is Reuters' energy and commodities editor.
We're already in the energy shock. I mean, to put it simple, the world has lost around a quarter of oil that it was getting daily before the war started. So when a quarter of something is not available, I mean, inevitably people will be scrambling to buy more and more oil and products for higher prices. So the shock is already very big.
But some countries are more exposed than others and less able to cushion the blow. In Europe, a fresh energy shock revives painful memories of the surge that followed Russia's invasion of Ukraine. Germany's industry-heavy economy has a lot to lose. Its manufacturing sector has only just stopped contracting for the first time since 2022. And as a major exporter, it's vulnerable to any global downturn. Italy also has a big manufacturing base, and oil and gas account for one of the highest shares of primary energy consumption in Europe, making it sensitive to price spikes. Britain's electricity system relies more on gas-fired power than other major European economies, and gas prices, rising faster than oil since the start of the war, often set its electricity costs. Japan is firmly in the firing line. It sources around 95% of its oil from the Middle East, and nearly 90% of that passes through the Strait of Hormuz. A weak yen is already lifting import costs, feeding through to food and daily necessities. Among emerging heavyweights, the Gulf faces a direct hit. Some forecasters now expect contraction this year, reversing pre-war growth hopes. Higher oil and gas prices are no help if the effective closure of Hormuz prevents exports, especially for Kuwait, Qatar and Bahrain. India is another exposed giant. It imports about 90% of its crude and nearly half of its liquefied petroleum gas, with roughly half of its oil and an even larger share of its LPG coming through Hormuz. Economists are trimming growth forecasts, and the rupee has fallen to a record low. Turkey, which borders Iran, is bracing for potential refugee inflows and more geopolitical uncertainty. Economically, its central bank has paused interest rate cuts again and has sold as much as $23 billion in reserves to bolster the lira. Sri Lanka has made every Wednesday a public holiday for state sector workers to cap energy costs. Schools, universities and public institutions are shutting. Non-essential public transport is suspended, and a national fuel pass now restricts fuel purchases. Pakistan, which was on the brink 2 years ago, has raised petrol prices and closed schools for 2 weeks. Government departments have had fuel allowances halved and are barred from buying new air conditioners. Reza Bakir is Global Head of Sovereign Advisory Services at Alvarez and Massel. He says it's a substantial economic shock to many emerging markets.
Countries that have large petroleum imports, for example, countries like Pakistan, Egypt, have had petroleum import bills last year of more than $10 billion each. Second, countries that have weak external balances, such as they have current account deficits or they don't have very high levels of foreign exchange reserves that can buffer these kinds of shocks.
Energy choke points and rising prices are testing economies worldwide. The longer the conflict persists, the more acute the pressure becomes.
Well, the Indian government has assured there is no shortage of petrol or diesel across the country, urging citizens not to panic or believe rumours circulating on social media. In a briefing, Petroleum Ministry official Sujata Sharma said refineries are running at high capacity with adequate crude inventories and sufficient fuel stocks available nationwide. Authorities, however, acknowledged that panic buying in some areas led to crowding at petrol pumps despite supplies remaining stable.
हमारे पास लगभग सालाना 26 करोड़ टन कच्चे तेल को रिफाइन करने की कैपेसिटी उपलब्ध है और ये मैं इसलिए बताना चाहती हूं क्योंकि पिछले 2 दिनों से हमने देखा है कि कई सारे क्षेत्रों में रिटेल आउटलेट्स या पेट्रोल पंप के बाहर लाइन देखी गई है और पैनिक बाइंग भी ऑब्जर्व की गई है। मैं देशवासियों को विश्वास दिलाना चाहती हूं कि हमारे पास पेट्रोल और डीजल पर्याप्त मात्रा में उपलब्ध है। कहीं पर भी किसी पेट्रोल पंप पर कोई कमी नहीं है। पेट्रोल पंप को सप्लाई करने वाले टर्मिनल्स पर भी पर्याप्त मात्रा में उपलब्ध है। इसलिए अफवाहों पर विश्वास न करें और पैनिक बाइंग से बचें। मैं ये भी बताना चाहती हूं कि पेट्रोल और डीजल के प्राइस में कोई बढ़ोतरी नहीं की गई है।
And from petrol and diesel, now let's move on to gas. The government has also mandated a shift from LPG to piped natural gas or PNG in areas where pipeline connectivity is available. Under a new order, households that do not switch to PNG within 3 months could see their LPG supply discontinued unless it is technically infeasible to provide a PNG connection. The move comes as India faces LPG supply disruptions due to the West Asia conflict, prompting efforts to reduce dependence on imports. Now, PNG, which is supplied directly through pipelines, is being promoted as a more reliable and convenient alternative.
आप लोगों के माध्यम से मैंने पहले भी बताया है कि पीएनजी एक्सपेंशन पर भारत सरकार का जोर है और इसीलिए इसी क्रम में कई सारे स्टेप्स भी लिए गए हैं। बहुत सारी कंपनियों ने बहुत सारे इंसेंटिव्स जैसे फ्री गैस 500 रुपए तक की या सिक्योरिटी डिपॉजिट वेवर जैसी चीजें अनाउंस की हैं। राज्य सरकारों को भी लिखा गया है और उन्हें भी 10% कमर्शियल गैस एलपीजी एडिशनल देने की बात की गई है। इस क्रम में कई सारे राज्यों ने कई स्टेप्स भी लिए हैं। जैसे एक मैं आपको बताती हूँ, दिल्ली में ही एक आदेश जारी हुआ है जिसके अंतर्गत रोड रेस्टोरेशन चार्ज को खत्म कर दिया गया है और पाइपलाइन बिछाने के लिए 24/7 वर्क को भी अलाउ किया गया है। इसी तरह कई अन्य राज्यों में भी इसी तरह के बड़े स्टेप्स लिए गए हैं।
And as tensions in West Asia remain intense, Commerce Minister Piyush Goyal urged that India must unite to tackle challenges arising from the conflict. He noted that the ongoing crisis has disrupted global shipping and pushed up oil prices, impacting trade flows. Goyal stressed that while India is not part of the war, sectors like exports could face difficulties, making it crucial for the nation to come together.
The message of oneness, there's a war going on. We have nothing to do with the war. India is not in any way involved in the war. But when such a big war is going on, there is collateral damage. There are difficulties. Maybe Malabar may be facing some difficulties in exporting to the Middle East and other countries. But this is the time the nation has to rally as one.
And we will slip into a very short break. When we come back, a lot more on the show. Keep watching News 9.
पढ़ता है, खेलता है, झूलता उछलता है, दौड़ता कभी कभी दौड़ कराता है, आगे आगे बढ़ता है इंडिया, अमूल दूध पीता है इंडिया।
At Tata Motors Commercial Vehicles, truck cabin safety begins at the design stage. We design cabins that preserve driver survival space and meet the gold standard of truck cabin safety, ECE R29.03. But we didn't stop at simulations. We tested for reality. This is real safety, delivered at the moment of impact. Tata Motors Commercial Vehicles, designing, testing and leading the future of trucking with safety at its core.
Welcome back. You are watching News 9. This is Morning Brief at 9. Time now to move away from the war in Iran and bring you other global stories. Let's begin with the scheduled trip of the US President to China. Well, the US President is set to visit China for a state visit on May 14th and 15th now, where he will meet Chinese President Xi Jinping. The White House has also confirmed that the Chinese leader will undertake a visit to Washington at a later date, signaling continued high-level engagement between the two global powers. The trip was originally, remember, scheduled for next week, but had to be postponed due to the ongoing US-Israel war on Iran. Let's listen in to what White House Press Secretary Caroline Leavitt has to say about the US President's visit to China.
President Trump's meeting and long-awaited meeting with President Xi in China will now take place in Beijing on May 14th and 15th. First Lady Melania and President Trump will also host President Xi and Madam Peng for a reciprocal visit in Washington, D.C. at a later date to be announced this year.
Just given that the president postponed his original trip to China because of the war, should we infer that the war will be wound down and concluded by the time of that May 15th, 14th visit?
Again, as I've said, we've always estimated approximately 4 to 6 weeks, so you could do the math on that, Mario, but we do look forward, I know the president looks forward to going to China on May 14th and 15th.
Moving on now, the United States has offered security guarantees for Ukraine, but with a major condition that Kyiv must cede the entire eastern Donbas region to Russia. Ukrainian President Volodymyr Zelensky revealed this in an interview, indicating that the proposed deal comes with significant territorial compromises. With Washington increasingly focused on its own conflict involving Iran, there appears to be a renewed push to resolve the Ukraine war quickly, even if it means difficult concessions for Kyiv.
Americans are ready to finalize the security guarantees at a high level once Ukraine is ready to withdraw from Donbass. In my view, the Russian side is shaping the atmosphere in its dialogue with the Americans around this very idea that Ukraine should withdraw from Donbass. The United States will then provide security guarantees Ukraine is seeking, and Russians will certainly end this war. More or less, this is the triangle we find ourselves in.
Of course, because American side, it's not a secret, they're very open with this, that their focus is Iran, that Ukraine is not the first priority. They shared this message with my team, and my team said that, look, but in any way we have such big, they said, yes, it's very important for us, the situation in Ukraine, the situation with the war, Russia against Ukraine, but you have to know this, our army is in Iran, and that's why our focus is on Middle East.
And on to news from the US big tech now. In a landmark US verdict, tech giants Google and Meta have been found liable for designing platforms deemed dangerous for children and teenagers. The ruling marks a significant moment for the tech industry, as it could now force Silicon Valley giants to rethink their legal strategies and introduce stronger safeguards to protect minors online. Take a look.
A landmark verdict Wednesday found Meta and Google liable for designing platforms dangerous to kids and teens. Both companies were slapped with damages to the tune of $6 million. The Los Angeles jury found Meta liable for $4.2 million of that and Alphabet's Google for $1.8 million. Those are small amounts for two of the world's most valuable companies, but the decision could force big tech to rethink how it defends itself against safety claims. Parents and child safety advocates celebrated news of a verdict outside the court.
This is the beginning of the tides turning on big tech for sure.
The case focused on a 20-year-old woman who said she became addicted to YouTube and Instagram at a young age because of their attention-grabbing design. Plaintiffs focused on how social media platforms are designed and not the content itself. That made it much harder for the companies to be found not liable. The jury found both companies negligent in designing both YouTube and Instagram, and that they failed to warn of their dangers. Snap and TikTok were also defendants, but both settled before the trial began. Those terms weren't disclosed. The plaintiff's lawyer Mark Lanier said Wednesday's verdict bodes well for thousands of other similar cases.
This is the tip of the spear. And you've got to remember, this is what's called a bellwether. It's the first trial. In the history of American jurisprudence, it usually takes the plaintiffs 3 or 4 times to figure out how to win these cases. The plaintiffs are supposed to lose the first 3 or 4. We won.
Meta spokesperson Ashley Nicole Davis gave a statement outside the court.
We respectfully disagree with the verdict and will appeal. Teen mental health is profoundly complex and cannot be linked to a single app. We will continue to defend ourselves vigorously as every case is different, and we remain confident in our record of protecting teens online.
A Google company spokesperson said they plan to appeal. Meta also said it plans to appeal. It all comes as tech companies face rising pressure over child and teen safety. The verdict could mark a turning point in the global backlash against their platform's perceived mental health harms to kids and teens. Colin Walk, who leads Holistill's cybersecurity and data privacy law practice, said the verdict sets a precedent for other cases.
I think it's been a long time coming because it's not as though any of the facts that came out at trial were particularly surprising to the general public. We've known for at least a decade now with tell-all books for former Google and Meta employees who come out and say, hey, we're using casino-style techniques in our algorithms to try and keep children on our screen so that we can sell more products. So it's not a particular surprise, long time coming, much like the tobacco litigation. So I think the jury's verdict will ultimately be upheld.
More separate trials in the U.S. are set for the months ahead. Another major trial involving several states and school districts is set for this summer in Oakland, California. A separate Los Angeles trial begins in July.
And on to China now. China's semiconductor industry is witnessing strong growth momentum as the global race to build artificial intelligence infrastructure fuels an unprecedented surge in demand for chips. Executives say the rapid expansion of AI technologies is driving higher capital expenditure, with chip makers ramping up investments and scaling up production capacity to keep pace. Take a look.
China's chip industry is showing strong growth momentum as a global sprint to build AI infrastructure creates an explosion in demand. Semiconductor industry executives said Wednesday that higher capital spending and capacity expansion has chip makers racing to keep up. Bai Yu spoke to Reuters from the sidelines of SemiCon China 2026 in Shanghai, one of the industry's largest annual gatherings. She is a vice president at Suzhou Origins Materials Technology.
We are very optimistic about the memory chip cycle. We are in memory cycle now, and there will be large-scale capacity expansion. So in order to meet the demand, we invested in the construction of a 100-acre production base, mainly to supply our raw materials to customers in the memory sector.
China's manufacturing capacity for chips used in cars, smartphones, and electronics is projected to reach 42% of global output by 2028, according to one industry executive. Also, China has become a major global supplier of optical interconnects, a critical layer linking chips inside data centers. It comes at a time when AI is becoming useful, said Zhao Limin of Micronix's MRSI unit, which makes high-precision chip equipment.
From last year to this year, AI suddenly exploded. Besides its explosion, its ability also increased a lot. In the past, you can use AI, but it's not that intelligent. Its outcome was not that perfect. Now it's more and more perfect. Its outcome is better than human beings. That's the biggest change we have seen in the past few years.
Participants in the fair also included foreign suppliers, as they remain central in higher-end segments of the chip supply chain, even as China's domestic industry expands. Cameron Johnson is a senior partner at Tidal Wave Solutions, a consultancy.
I think one of the key things is that there's still a place for foreign firms because it is a very specialized industry. You have to have the expertise, you have to have the raw materials, you have to have the know-how, the understanding.
He added that in China, foreign companies often retain an edge in after-sales support and technical services, areas where domestic competitors are still catching up.
And from China's semiconductor industry to South Korea, the South Korean chip giant SK Hynix is planning a major move to tap global markets, with a confidential filing for a U.S. listing expected in the second half of this year. According to sources, the potential share sale could raise as much as $14 billion, making it one of the biggest semiconductor listings in recent years.
South Korean chip maker SK Hynix says it plans a confidential filing to list shares in the U.S. in the second half of 2026. A Reuters source says the move could raise as much as $14 billion. One person with direct knowledge of the discussion said the company would list about 2 to 3% of its total shares. The source said the funds would be used to help finance chip factories in South Korea and the U.S. state of Indiana. Confidential filings allow companies to withhold details about their finances, and offering terms until closer to the actual listing. SK Hynix did not immediately respond to a request for comment. In a domestic regulatory filing on Wednesday, the company said it aimed to complete the listing within 2026, but hadn't finalized details including size. SK Hynix is one of the world's largest memory chip makers. It has been expanding production capacity to keep up with strong demand for artificial intelligence data centers. Shares in the firm gained around 1% in Wednesday trade.
And on to other stories from the world of technology and artificial intelligence. Now, from a major setback for Anthropic to a big leap by Alibaba in AI hardware, the AI race is witnessing rapid and dramatic developments. Where geopolitical concerns, technological breakthroughs and corporate competition are all colliding. Here's a quick roundup of the biggest stories shaping the AI revolution this week.
From Anthropic's blacklisting battle to Alibaba's next-gen chip. This is AI Weekly. A US judge said on Tuesday the Pentagon's blacklisting of Anthropic looks like punishment for its views on AI safety in the military. The AI lab has challenged the Pentagon's unprecedented action in designating it a national security risk, and came after Anthropic's refusal to allow the military to use its Claude AI software for US surveillance or autonomous weapons. The lawsuit alleges that Defense Secretary Pete Hegseth overstepped his authority when he made that designation. The judge said during a court hearing that the designation, which blocks the AI lab from certain military contracts, quote, looks like an attempt to cripple Anthropic. Tesla CEO Elon Musk said on Thursday that the automaker may be able to tape out its next-generation AI6 chips in December. That's the stage of finalising the chip design and sending it off to be manufactured. Musk said last year that Samsung would make the AI6 chips after the Korean company clinched a $16.5 billion production deal. The chips are likely to be used in Tesla's self-driving cars and humanoid robots. OpenAI plans to nearly double its workforce by the end of the year. That's according to the FT, citing two sources. It said the AI startup, whose latest funding round valued it at $840 billion, is looking to expand to 8,000 from its current 4,500 and deploy most of the new hires across production development, engineering, research and sales. Reuters could not immediately verify the report, and OpenAI did not immediately respond to Reuters' request for comment. ARM Holdings announced a new AI data center chip on Tuesday, which it said will add billions of dollars of revenue. The new chip, called the AGI CPU, will address data crunching needed for agentic AI. It's a specific type of AI that can achieve complex tasks with minimal human oversight. One example being Microsoft Copilot. ARM shares jumped 6.5% in the extended session after the company issued its financial projections. Staying with agentic AI, Alibaba has unveiled its next-generation chip, with its international equivalent called ASIO Work. The Chinese tech giant said it performs more than 3 times faster than its predecessor. That's as Alibaba works towards high-performance cloud systems and agentic AI. The agentic AI platform says it can autonomously run complex business operations for small and medium-sized enterprises.
All right, and now let's pivot to all the action from the stock markets. Let's begin with the US. Wall Street's main indices closed higher on Wednesday as easing oil prices lifted investor sentiment amid fresh hopes for de-escalation in West Asia. However, uncertainty remains visible, with markets continuing to react sharply to every headline as geopolitical risks and energy prices remain closely intertwined.
U.S. stocks closed higher on Wednesday, with the Dow adding 0.2%, the S&P 500 gaining more than 0.5%, and the Nasdaq climbing more than 0.75%. Investors' hopes for a de-escalation of the Middle East conflict were buoyed by Iran's review of a U.S. proposal to end the war, which helped push oil prices 2% lower. But Chris Campitsis, managing partner at Barnum Financial Group, advises caution amid a still volatile market and mixed economic data.
It's easy to be hopeful on a day like today. I think optimistic is probably too strong of a word. It's very much a wait-and-see approach on Wall Street, and people are looking for any sign to either exit stage left or get that cash on the sidelines back into the market stage right. And we do think ultimately the economy should base case avoid tipping into recession. But fears of stagflation, fears of resurgent inflation are not misplaced. It's very reasonable to be concerned here.
Stocks on the move Wednesday included U.S.-listed shares of ARM, which rallied more than 16% after the semiconductor company unveiled a new AI data center chip that is expected to bring billions of dollars in revenue. Other chip makers rallied, including Advanced Micro Devices and Intel, which both gained more than 7%, while NVIDIA added 2%. Shares of management investment company Destiny Tech 100 surged 15% after a report that SpaceX aims to file its IPO prospectus as soon as this week. SpaceX is the company's largest equity holding. Other space firms rallied on the news, with Rocket Lab adding more than 10%, while Intuitive Machines jumped nearly 15% and EchoStar added nearly 7.5%.
All right, so that was the investor mood in the United States. Let's look at the Asian stocks now. Remember, the Indian stock markets are closed, but rest of Asia is open. Let's quickly pull up the Asian charts and see, well, massive corrections seen across most of the Asian benchmark indices, with the Hang Seng, Hong Kong's benchmark, correcting as much as 1.4% in trade this morning. Japan's Nikkei 225, which has seen a massive rally in the last 4 days, is trading flat this morning. Minor losses, second decimal points really. Meanwhile, another massive correction seen even in South Korea's Kospi, which is down more than 2% or so in trade. And China's Shanghai Composite Index also down about 0.6 percentage points. The only exception in the Asian pack this morning comes from Taiwan's TAIEX Index, which is up about 0.4 percentage point. Remember, Indian markets today are closed on account of Ram Navami, but they had a fantastic trading session yesterday, with the Sensex up more than 1,200 points. That's 1.6% up in trade yesterday, trading above that 75,270 odd levels. Nifty 50 also following suit, up about 400 points, trading at 23,300 odd levels, with the Nifty mid-cap and small-cap outperforming the benchmark indices, both up more than 2.3% or so. Volatility in the Indian stock markets remained high all of yesterday, closing the day at about 24.64 levels. Meanwhile, the maximum gains were seen from the banking and financial industry yesterday. BFSI stocks closed the day with very healthy gains. HDFC Bank recovering massively, up about 2.27%, and SBI up about almost 3% or so. Also positive momentum seen on consumer durable stocks, especially auto stocks, with Mahindra & Mahindra closing the day higher by about 3% or so. Maruti Suzuki up about 2%. Also heavyweights including Bharti Airtel remained high, all in the trading session yesterday, up about 1.8%. Of course, the correction came by way of tech stocks, which continue to trade flat, and in some cases like TCS ending the day lower. And it's been a volatile year, all of 2026, from the 1st of Jan, and things got further exacerbated with the UN and Israel war on Iran. Stock markets have plunged massively, but history has got some lessons, and in the last 25 odd years, the Indian stock markets, like global markets, have seen massive downturns and then sharp recoveries. Let's look back at some of these events. Let's begin from the turn of the millennium. February 2000, in fact, is when the dot-com bust in Gulf stock markets across the world. India was not spared either. The Sensex and the Nifty had plunged as much as 40% between the years 2000 and 2001. The Ketan Parith K10 tech stocks, the IT stocks, were the worst hit. Remember, Nasdaq had been the worst hit during the dot-com bust, and that cast a very ugly shadow on the Indian stock market, especially IT stocks. Meanwhile, 8 years later, October 2008 is when the global financial crisis, popularly known as the subprime crisis or the Lehman Brothers fallout, hit both the global markets as well as Indian markets really hard. Sensex and Nifty were down about 60% in just 3 months. Indian banking stocks, infrastructure stocks, and real estate stocks had been the hardest hit. cut back another 8 years when the demonetization decision was announced on the 8th of November 2016. The Indian market's extreme ultra short-term volatility was experienced with the Sensex crashing back then as much as 1,700 points. Remember, Sensex was trading at much lower levels, but crashing 1,700 points then amounted to about a 6% crash on November 9th, the first trading session after demonetization came into effect. That time, this was the biggest single-day decline. But the very next day, on November 10th, you saw the banking stocks recover. And then came, of course, the COVID-19 lockdown, March 2020. Panic selling on the lockdown announcement when the Sensex and Nifty fell as much as 40%. Remember, the fall was witnessed right from about 25th of Jan or so all the way till the 23rd of March and beyond. And remember, between those 3 months, the Sensex and the Nifty had fallen as much as 40%. And then what we saw was a V-shaped recovery, which eventually led to a 13% gain on the benchmark indices when the year ended. And then, of course, 2022, we had the Russia-Ukraine war. There was again short-term volatility, a massive FII exodus, especially from India's IT and auto stocks. What we saw later was global inflation as a result of high energy prices and some large economies, including those of Germany, slipping into technical recession. And then this year hasn't been great either. In fact, quite the opposite. The US-Israel-Iran war has pushed oil prices much higher, and the closure of the Strait of Hormuz has created panic across global economies, fearing inflation and potentially global slowdown if this happens to be a prolonged war. Markets have remained volatile. But if history has anything to tell us, it's that every time there has been a massive correction in stock markets across the world, the bounce back has been even sharper. And every time after a downturn, there has been new record highs set by stock markets. We don't know how the story will pan out this year, but things aren't looking pretty so far as the declines that we are seeing in indices from the 1st of Jan are concerned. This year, Nifty has been down more than 10%. The Nifty Oil and Gas Index has also been down about 10.5% ever since the 1st of Jan right through the 25th of March. Meanwhile, Nifty Auto, Nifty Bank also continuing to slide, showing overall bearish grip engulfing the Indian stock markets. Nifty IT has been the hardest hit. The Nifty IT is down about 1/5, 20% or so of its value, with the small cap and the mid cap stocks also reflecting the broader erosion sentiment. At the heart of all this crisis are, of course, spiking oil prices, and we've seen oil prices since the start of the year have been at about 70% higher values in trade. Well, we've seen some step-up approach as far as oil prices are concerned, going up all the way from just levels of about 81 on March 5th, just 5 days after the war in Iran broke out, stepping up to levels of 87, 93, slight correction at 92, going up all the way to $106 a barrel on March 20th. Finally correcting to as low as about $95 a barrel on March 25th, and then again a small spike seen at levels of about $98 a barrel on March 25th. Time for another very short break. When we come back, all the action from the TV9 What India Thinks Today's Summit that concluded on March 24th.
खेलता है झूलता उछलता है दौड़ता कभी कभी दौड़ कराता है आगे आगे बढ़ता है इंडिया अमूल दूध पीता है इंडिया
So, what do you think?
तुम नहीं समझोगे।
The new Skoda Kushaq, easy to love. Skoda.
Welcome back. You are watching News 9. Time now for a quick highlight recap of the most anticipated moments from TV9 Network's flagship What India Thinks Today 2026 summit. Because when the Prime Minister of India, Narendra Modi, took the stage, it wasn't just an address. It was a signal, a statement and a direction for the nation and beyond. From economic ambition to India's place in a rapidly shifting global order, all eyes were on the national capital as the Prime Minister's keynote set the tone for this year's summit. And what unfolded was more than just a speech. It was a moment that brought together the very architects of India's growth story under one roof. Policy, business, innovation and influence all converging in one room. A reception that spoke volumes, a stage that reflected scale and a message that resonated far beyond one evening. Let's take you straight to that defining moment.
Prime Minister Narendra Modi at TV9 Network's flagship Thought Summit.
अपना नमस्ते भी मल्टीनेशनल हो गया है.
What India Thinks Today, straight from the national capital. The evening reached a defining moment with Prime Minister Narendra Modi, greeted by a packed audience marked by the who's who of the India growth story rising in unison. A powerful symbol of recognition and resonance at the What India Thinks Today summit. He was welcomed with a traditional shawl by Rameshwar Rao Jupalli, founder and chairman of My Home Industries, marking a blend of tradition and transformation.
India's digital-first model offers a unique distinction as developed economies seek talent beyond borders. This advantage accrues out of our Honorable Prime Minister Modi ji's commitment to twin pillars of youth and the digital divide.
The Honorable Prime Minister Sri Narendra Modi ji, sir, on behalf of TV9 Network, I would like to express my deepest gratitude to you for being with us here this evening. The task of transforming a country of 1.4 billion people is a daunting one. In my lifetime, there is no other leader who has dared to set BHAGs or big, hairy, audacious goal for a country and executed on them the way Prime Minister Modi has.
The summit reflects the journey of India on the move, led by Prime Minister Narendra Modi.
And as the war in West Asia sends shockwaves across global energy markets, pushing oil prices higher and rattling economies, India appears to be holding steady. Speaking at that TV9 flagship Thought Summit, What India Thinks Today, Professor Ramcharan highlighted how India has managed the crisis far more effectively than many others.
Oil, LPG, prices go up, unavailability. Bharat Sarkar, Modi ji did a fabulous job. How many of you think they did the fabulous job? Raise your hand. No other country is able to do that. That includes America. Now we are disturbed. $90 billion went out. Cry of inflation began to happen. We are now in an era, not just geopolitical, not just geo-economic, in the era of continuous wars in the world. It began in February 22, Russia, Ukraine, and these skirmishes continue to do. So we need to be alert.
And at a time when global uncertainty continues to rise, India's calibrated response is now being seen as a case study in crisis management. And with that, we come to the end of this edition of the Morning Brief at 9. Thank you so much for watching. News continues right here on News 9, so stay tuned.
खेलता है झूलता उछलता है दौड़ता कभी कभी दौड़ कराता है आगे आगे बढ़ता है इंडिया अमूल दूध पीता है इंडिया.
What you saw me on the field and off the field is like chalk and cheese. Is leadership acquired or leaders are born?
No guts, no glory, no pain, no gain.
My tendency is to go for magic, not for perfection.
I never give up. I like to win.
If you believe you can, you can.
Just me being here, it's a statement.
You define called against all odds. You seem to be a Destiny's Child. When chips are down, the whole team could have looked up to you.